That was a robot.
Hello and welcome to the Emperor's New Podcast, where we normally talk about the Emperor's New Groove and related media. But since today's April Fool's Day, we're gonna bust a Mool's Day, and we're gonna talk about Home on the Range. Today, I am joined by one of the hosts of Mystery Shack Look Back, Shelby Sessler,
Hello, my friends.
for the first time on the podcast. One of the other hosts of Mystery Shack Look Back. You may also know them for Real-Time Fan Dubs and as the voice of narrator in my documentary, Beware the Groove, the Making of a Cult Classic, Charley Marlowe.
Those are me.
And also very clearly on this podcast for the first and probably, only time, one of the directors of Home on the Range, John Sanford.
Hello. I like that you
Hello.
made use of that marketing tag that they came up for the movie that they were so incredibly proud of, that you would not believe.
How
think
did
that they
you
split the atom.
how did you feel about the marketing of this film?
I just went, okay. What am I gonna? Truth be told, when you're directing one of these movies, the marketing department at the time was this dude who was like,
just a dude.
He was how would I describe him? Super. He'd just pop into the room like, hey, like that, when he'd show you whatever he had. He'd always pull a face and go like that. Yeah. And then you'd go, hey, how you doing? And then he'd say, so this is what I've got. And we'd go, anytime you'd say, I don't know about this. And
hey,
go,
you realize,
hey man, 25 years in the business, man. I'm just telling you, 25 years in the business. Yeah. I'm telling you.
Hey, you realize we just made a Western version of Pied Piper and not Shrek, right? You're clear on that? Because it doesn't seem from the ads that it seems you think we just made Shrek.
He would just, but everything, and he would say that to everybody. The only
25 years.
25. Hey, because you go, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. You whatever you say. Hey, I'm just saying, 25 years in the business. I know what I'm talking about. And you're like, okay, fine.
I guess you know more about my movie than I do.
Yeah. Well, the thing that they always tell you is that they know more about selling your movie than you do. But what's interesting is that, and I don't want to sidetrack over to Lilo and Stitch, when it came to Lilo and Stitch, they had absolutely no idea how to market that movie. That whole thing where get your own movie where Stitch is dropped into other people's movies. Chris and Dean came up with that.
Oh, really?
That was their idea. Yeah, Chris and Dean came up with that. because the marketing was like, we don't know how to market this because it wasn't anything they'd ever done. So that we got no ideas. So they're just like, well, jumping off of what the president of feature animation pointed out, he said, well, the selling point of this movie is Stitch. Stitch is going to sell this movie. So they're like, okay, we'll introduce the world to Stitch by putting him in other Disney movies, showing how he's different, and then show you the movie he's in. Yeah. And it was an award-winning, groundbreaking campaign that they've since never reproduced.
Oh yeah, I was 9 in 2002. I still remember those ads very clearly.
Well, as a kid, Lilo and Stitch was, as a kid, my hyperfixation. So, what's interesting is those did a great job selling the movie and also being like unique, their own thing from the movie as well. Which is why I say, they should have also done something similar with New Groove, because I think that would have sold.
Yeah, they didn't know how to sell that either. They didn't sell it.
I know they did.
But 25 years in the business, so maybe they did.
I'll say that all of those have very unique premises. Like, there's not a way to sell, like, with 25 years in the business, you would think that they would be able to say, hey, let's flip this idea on its side, or like, let's take a look at it from another angle. I think that maybe 25 years in the business was hindering his ability to sell some of these movies.
I think so. So. He just knew how to do what he did, and that's it. So that's fine. And he's I don't have anything against him. I think he was a lovely guy, but He didn't
I
know how to
made
sell
use
movies.
of the tagline because this is the April Fool's Day episode, and technically that it's going to release the day before the 19th anniversary of Home on the Range.
That's
Because the
19 years,
tagline
is
for
it?
Home on the Range was Bust a Move
19
April
years, huh?
Fool.
19 years. Okay.
So I did not watch Home on the Range back in the day, probably because admittedly the ads didn't make it look very interesting. I actually just watched it for the first time, and I like legit honestly adored it. Like
That's
I
good to hear.
enjoyed every freaking second of it. I loved all of the characters, although of course special mention to the villain always. The my wife who is a artist, character designer, graphic designer, I think she said visually it is her favorite 2D animated movie from the
Wow.
Disney oeuvre.
Wow. Okay. I'll have to pass that along to whoever I run into.
Hey, did you know that some Russian artist somewhere said my movie?
No, whenever I run into somebody, like, because this is a thing that's happened with, because I was had a story on Atlantis, which was another movie that came out, and at the time they didn't know how to market it. They
What?
thought
There seems to be
It's
a theme here.
Stargate. Like it's Stargate, but animated, which is
well,
why I love it.
it confused them. Well, here's the thing. It confused them that when they put the movie out, because they thought they're like, well, this is a boys movie. This is a movie for boys. And then they were really confused that all these preteen, teen, and college age girls loved it. And we're like,
because of Michael J. Fox.
And they were like, no, it's because it's hitting that anime crowd.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And they were like so confused. And I remember my partner on Home on the Range was like, well, that's a miss then. And I'm like, no, redirect your marketing. They have money. They're going to spend more, like girls arguably spend more money on manga and anime and all the tchotchkes and stuff than I mean, just make those crazy little chibi versions of Milo and the Crew, put them on keychains, get them out there, t-shirts. I mean, it was a missed opportunity. They weren't able to, a company like that can't pivot that quickly.
Like the thing is, between like the anime crowd and the fact that like Stargate is one of like the TV show was one of the longest running TV shows on TV. There is a huge crowd for that particular type of media that they completely missed out on by marketing it just to kids.
Yeah,
I love it. I love that movie.
I agree.
So if it's all right, Micah, if I may ask a question to our guest.
You can ask.
So I saw prior to this, you were worked in story on a lot of Disney films. How did that transition into helming your own project?
At the time, and I don't know if this is how this happens anymore, but I think it does at DreamWorks. More often than not, a story artist who has particular sensibilities and exhibits some kind of like just a good sense of structure as a whole will be promoted to director. And when I was at Disney, I was one of the things I was really interested in is writing and screenwriting and structure, and I always talked about the movie as a whole, saw the movie as a whole. So when I was in meetings, I would ping pong back and forth between moments in the movie to the point where it was maybe aggravating to some people in the room. But just because I have ADHD, so my brain just
I was about to ask
all that stuff up. My brain just naturally connects that stuff up. I just so that's a particular gift that they think that makes a good director. So when I was promoted to head of story on Atlantis, and that's when a lot of times when they do that, that means they're prepping you to direct. And they were pretty clear that that's the path they had for me on Atlantis. The way I knew this is I was in an Atlantis meeting when we were talking about notes, and they passed around a balance sheet like they do after every screening. There's a note session, and they pass around a balance sheet. They don't do this anymore, but they did at the time, that has the cost of all the notes. And you can literally see have Milo say X instead of Y, and then there's a dollar amount attached to that change. So you get to that way you can figure out which notes, because at the point because those movies are expensive, they're like, well, let's be smart about what notes we address. Let's not address every note, otherwise our budget's going to be we're going to be out of business. So let's be very smart about this. And they passed me that sheet. And I was sitting there, I was just like sitting there in that meeting, that sheet's put right in front of me, and I picked it up. And I went, should I be seeing this? I looked around and everybody else was just studying the sheet. And Tom Schumacher sat down, and he was the head of feature animation at the time, enjoying the fact that I was like, I looked at one note and I went, that's more than my house. And everybody kind of giggled, and because there was a note that was literally cost more than my house did. And they Tom said, this is the last movie that you'll be on where you won't know this information. So enjoy your bliss. That's the way he put it. And so after that, I was put into development to like work and become a director. And that's kind of how, and it's just because I, as a story person, I was very vocal and had, not just vocal, but I had ideas that worked. So that's kind of how you become a director there.
Yeah.
Or at the time, that's how
I think that still is how it works, at least in the TVA, because I follow a lot of board artists who have worked on like DuckTales, who have gone on to work on other shows, and they've gone from board artists to like directors now. So like I think that still is how the pipeline goes.
Well, I think that makes sense, because as a sequence, when you get a sequence, you're a mini director. You're directing this part of the sequence.
Yeah.
And you have to work it in a way that it fits, it also slots into the whole.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good test. It's a good test to see who can do it.
It sees how well you work with other people too.
That's right.
Shelby,
Absolutely.
what was your connection or your experience with Home on the Range prior to this?
Prior to that, I remember.
I was talking to Shelby. Sorry.
Oh, me?
Oh, Shelby, sorry. Go ahead.
I hadn't seen it until last night. And then I listened to like an interview that you did 4 years ago, and I was like, there's a whole lot of really interesting information that I hadn't even thought about. I was 13 or 14 when it came out. So I had a very short range where I was like, I'm too cool for cartoons. And then I was like, oh no, I want to be a voice actor. So like,
you had a very short range, but a very long home.
It's true. It's true. Cartoons are my home. Yeah, I hadn't been familiar with it prior to this. But what's interesting to me is how many different versions of this movie there were before it came to your version. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I would love to. And I'll tell as many jokes as I can.
Please.
When I was first aware of this movie, it was an idea that Mike Gabriel was developing. Mike Gabriel, who is an amazing artist, and I have nothing but love and respect for Mike. He really wanted to make an animated Western, and to Mike, because he's of a particular age, Westerns are Roy Rogers, John Wayne, Randolph Scott. You know, the cowboy hats and the vests with the frills and all that crazy stuff, and the singing with a guitar on the horseback, all that stuff. So that's the flavor he was after. He was after that kind of flavor. And so the original story was basically Captains Courageous in the Wild West. If you're all familiar with that story, I'll sum it up really quickly. A rich kid is sent out west by his dad. He gets caught up and lost and gets caught up in a cattle drive, and he discovers he can't buy his way out of problems, and he can't order people around, and through the course of becoming a part of this cattle herding crew, he becomes a man. He learns values, he learns work, and the journey changes him. For those people in my age group, it's Cabin Boy. It's Cabin Boy in the Old West.
That is completely different from the end product of the movie.
Yeah. So that's what it was. Now here's the thing: the original version still had the villains were ghosts. there's a ghost town. There are ghosts that harassed and vexed the crew. The interesting thing is Lucky Jack still existed as a character. So there's a talking rabbit with a peg leg and a bandana. One of the horses talked. I don't know whether that's okay. There was still talking animals. There was still a big fantasy element to the movie, and the drawings were beautiful. He did the most. If you can sometimes find it online.
I know there's a Tumblr post about it.
Yeah,
there's
it's
a Tumblr
beautiful
post with all of them.
Oh yeah, it did some beautiful work.
Oh, yeah.
And Floyd Norman did an extensive post about one of the versions he worked on. I think he worked on that version, but he also worked on the subsequent version. So Michael Eisner sees this pitch, and Michael Eisner says, "Oh, I thought it would be about the cows. Animated movie, it should be about the cows." So they kind of go,
like you were in the room with me right now.
That's my Michael, and it's not the best
It's pretty good.
Whoa. Can you say
I definitely felt him saying that to me after I put all this work into it. I'm like, okay, cool, great.
So and Michael at the time famously, when they showed him Chicken Little, and Chicken Little was a little girl character played by Holly Hunter. Yeah. I always thought Chicken Little was a boy character. It's a boy character, isn't he? Can he be a boy character? Yeah, he's a boy character. I just don't get it. So that was his pronouncement. So they went back, they took this in, and rather than and I don't know how much they would have had. Mike, I think the one weakness Mike has as a storyteller is he doesn't know how to stand up for things. If I can be perfectly honest, and I think this is something, by the way, I would say to Mike personally. Like you never stand up. You got to stand up for your vision, and you just weren't that guy. So they went back and they rethought the movie so that it was about a little bull on a cattle drive named Bullet. Sweating bullets, Bullet. And so they still had the ghostly cows, the ghosts. The ghost villains, and it was the adventures of this little cow on a cattle drive, and he becomes, they go from here to here, and the little cow grows up and learns a lesson, and that wasn't working for whatever reason. I don't know what the pitfalls were from that idea, but one of the things that kept happening is that and there were different ideas. I don't know when and where the idea that the villain could hypnotize cows and steal them away with his yodel.
It was a great plot twist, honestly.
I think it's a great idea, and I can even tell you the person who came up with the idea. It was a story man named Robert Lentz, who worked on Toy Story and Toy Story 2, and is a great, really, really smart.
Which were also sort of a Western.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy. He was my story teacher at Cal Arts, and I basically learned structure from Robert Lentz. And then I had him on my crew. That's where at some point, the story team, and this is another thing where Mike couldn't really argue his vision. The story team, which was the group of story artists, decided the ghosts didn't make sense as villains, because how do you beat a ghost? They couldn't figure out how to.
There's a 14-year TV show all about it.
There's also, at the exact same time, Disney released another old Hollywood genre film where they fight ghosts with Pirates of the Caribbean.
And my whole thing is, I said there's an episode of I Dream of Jeannie where Major Healy beats an evil genie by using a vacuum cleaner to vacuum him up when he's in his smoke form. And then he just stuffs a handkerchief in a thing and drops it in the ocean.
The thing is, you get to make up the rules of your world.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you just say, oh, well, ghosts are allergic to iron. That's how you kill them.
Ghosts can't. Exactly. It's like it's like Hellboy in the Corpse in the Iron Shoes. It's that, or it's that whole thing.
It's like, well, ghosts aren't real, so I get to make up how they get defeated. This is a movie, you understand.
This is kind of a group of guys who were like not super happy, and I say guys because it was all guys at that point. They weren't super happy, and they just like to attack things. So eventually they couldn't get the movie past Act 1 in reels. So they're like, there's definitely a problem here. And so they threw it up to the story team and say, okay, you guys, all of you, pitch ideas for the movie. We'll go with the best one. I'm not kidding. They did that.
I
So
know.
two of the guys came up with this idea of these 3 cows that go off, that decide to become bounty hunters to save their farm. And because you can say that in a sentence, you can say that in one sentence. 3 cows,
but not in an ad for some reason.
become bounty hunters to save their failing farm. That's an interesting. You can grab around that and figure out how to make that funny. They're like, that's the one. That's the one we're going to do. So that's when it became, basically, it was still Sweating Bullets, but it eventually became Home on the Range. That's when the 3 cows came out. It's when Calloway, Maggie, and Grace were created. At that time, they still had these characters, these mariachi characters, these mariachi butterflies. They were grasshoppers at first, or cicadas. And when we came on, Will Finn wanted to make them butterflies, so we made them butterflies initially. The idea that there was these singing characters that kind of told the story was a thing we played with for a bit and then dropped really quickly, because it just didn't. You've got 75 to 80 minutes to tell your story. How much time are you going to waste on these characters who come in, say stuff, and then leave? It's not like the thing I kept pointing out at one point when I was trying to make the thing work. I was like, well, it's Jonathan Richman in Something About Mary. That's funny. You kind of pan up to a tree and he's sitting in the tree with his guitar playing friend and he sings the song about what's going on. And then you come back to Ben Stiller and he's doing his thing. And that movie's 90 minutes long. They have a lot of time to get in and out of those sequences. We didn't have that luxury. So
it was always decided that this movie would be like an hour, 15 minutes.
It was always the standard at the time. I know that the Disney movies are interminably long now, or at least seem that way. The cap on our running time was 80 minutes. That was that somebody at some point figured out that 80 minutes was the proper time limit for an animated feature.
And they're right.
In terms of budget, in terms of like how much, because animation's expensive. Let's be honest. And the exhibitors wanted to be able to cram as many showings into a. So the exhibitors had their say. They're like, "Hey, could you make those? We could show them more, and then we could all make more money." And so the studio's like, "Sure, we'll that makes sense for us." So 80 minutes is what they hit upon and it was that way for decades. You couldn't find a movie that was longer than 80 until what was it? Where did they start going over? It definitely wasn't Mulan, because I remember Peter Schneider would come in the room and yell at us to get it under 80 minutes. And Home on the Range is like 75.
Yeah.
And Lilo and Stitch is like 77 and change.
And Emperor's New Groove is 78.
Yeah, 78. Short and sweet. Boom. You're in, you're out. And you've got a nice little story that is tight with no filler. All killer, no filler. It's like a great record. And you don't waste your time with a lot of stupid nonsense like this. I tried to watch that Strange World, and there's like a sequence where they make breakfast for like an hour and a half. At least it seems like an hour and a half. And I'm like, why am I watching these people make breakfast while a song plays? It's full of stuff that we would have just clipped out of older movies.
Yeah.
And it would have made it much more
I feel like
interesting.
there seems to be this like pressure now to make movies longer.
Well,
Like if a movie needs to be long, that if it actually the story has to, in order for the story to be told, it needs to be long. That's fine, but I feel like there's pressure to add filler to make it longer.
Right. It just doesn't move it for me. It's like I think what it's supposed to say is, isn't it nice seeing this family be happy? And I'm like, well, I get that from the way they interact with each other. I don't need to see them cook dinner. I don't need to see a sequence that you think is clever that is not. It's sorry,
go on.
No, I'm done.
Okay. I'll say that like this current season of the Owl House got shortened from a full season to 3 episodes. And so the way that they are budgeting their time in each of these 45-minute episodes, it's basically like instead of telegraphing everything that happened in that time, they're saying this is what we established in the first 2 seasons, and then this is what happened in 3 months in between this episode and this episode. So it's like they're just utilizing the way that people are working with each other, talking to each other to establish the relationships. And that feels like a smarter way to use time
And that's
for
how
characters.
that's how a lot of these movies, like Emperor's New Groove, and they establish through characters the instead of wordy exposition or having long shots, they just have characters interacting with each other, and that's way more interesting and entertaining.
And we said while we were watching the movie, like, I don't think you could cut any of this. It's, every scene has its purpose.
And anything we could cut out of Home and Range, we did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff we cut out, but it's tight. And in some places I tried to watch it 2 or 3 years ago, and I was just there's transitional things that bothered me, and I turned it off. I'm way more critical of the stuff I work on. I can't even make it through. I can't even make it through Atlantis anymore.
Oh well, I same. I mean, not same Atlantis, but same. I'm critical of the stuff I work on too.
Yeah, I think we all are. I think that we can all see our flaws more than anybody else can. I will say that there are a few transitions in there that I'm like, whoa, that was a good transition. My favorite is the one where they're talking about Buck and then it goes straight into his dream and then it like shortens.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say,
I love that transition so much.
I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of that sequence. I'm very proud of that sequence.
It's so good. Like, and the fact that it comes back later on is a great callback. Like, that's my that one sat with me. I was like, I thought about that for hours after I watched the movie. Yeah.
It was our way of getting a gunfight into the movie. It's a gunfight without guns, because we were told after working on Atlantis for 3.5 years. Where we had guns and could shoot things. The directive was no guns. We don't want any gunplay in this movie. And we were like,
you're allowed to make your Western with no guns.
Without guns. A gunless Western. But
there's guns, but they don't use them.
in this day and age, I'm not as I made fun of it at the time. In this day and age, I'm like, no, I think it's pretty responsible to try and work around that aspect of the American West.
I worked at a Wild West theme park as a character performer, and the programming schedule was made in 1962 and never changed. And so all
guns all the time.
Oh yeah, so I would have to, when the guests, who were mostly grandparents with their grandchildren, who went there in 1962, had nostalgia for it, and was like, oh, my grandkids will love this. And the grandkids, turns out when someone stopped their carriage ride or their train ride and held them at gunpoint and demanded their grandparents' earrings or whatever, they didn't like that. And the first time a kid started crying, I was like, oh yeah, why am I doing this? This is insane. This is a terrible form of entertainment for children.
I'd imagine this kid had probably in this day and age had like live shooter drills, and probably just like his training took over.
Oh, absolutely. It's so wildly inappropriate. I'm like, I need to figure out a different way to do this.
It's an interesting thing, but at the time we complained. I think there's a way of getting, but that was our way of getting a gunfight into the movie. Is they show up, they don't get to fire. We turned it into the things we kept drawing on is like, well, let's do a old style shootout, but let's make it like, we were thinking about that. We loved that opening sequence of, if you can Google it, you might have to Google it, Wild Wild West, with a dun dun dun, you see little that thing. So we were riffing on that. We loved that. So that stylistically it's kind of a bit like that. We loved, I was a big fan of, and still am a big fan of, Hong Kong action movies. So there's quite a bit of like Bruce Lee posing and Jackie Chan timing.
Is that why the aspect ratio changes during that dream sequence?
That's a nod to Sergio Leone.
Oh, Sergio Leone. Yeah. Yes.
That's a nod to Sergio Leone. And
I
then
think it became so popular that it just has become a common trope in parodies of Western.
yeah, where you just bring the bars in. The other thing that
Also, video games do that.
yeah, that too. The other thing we were kind of riffing on was there's a thing I know I lifted out of a Batman cartoon. That thing where Buck grabs the guy with his lasso and yanks him over, and then
Yes.
the guy flies towards camera and Buck hits him. I saw that in a Batman cartoon, and I said, let's just take that move.
And not the only Batman reference in the movie either.
Yeah, we do a lot of them. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
Yeah, that's the other one. But I can't help. That's just kind of, I just crib stuff from all sorts of places. I think that's just
how art is made.
That's just art. There's like Kung Fu Hustle in this movie. There's not Kung Fu Hustle, Shaolin Soccer. There's bits and pieces of that here throughout. There's all sorts of stuff that we just ladled in that we liked.
So I've decided. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'm done.
I've decided who my two favorite characters in the movie are after. So my experience was I saw it as a kid, and my opinion was basically, I'm a kid, so I just think it's okay because I'm a kid. Then as I got older, it kind of had a reputation, so I kind of didn't like it as much. Seeing it now, I see what doesn't work about it, but there's a lot of stuff I like. So my favorite characters are Grace and Alameda Slim.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
I think that the reputation it has for being like the worst Disney film is like, it shouldn't have that reputation because I've seen worse Disney films.
Well, yeah.
So it feels like it's doing you guys such a disservice.
Yeah, the reputation is, and this isn't true either, that it's among the worst of the animated canon, but I think objectively the worst animated canon Disney movie is Pocahontas.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is a lot better than Pocahontas was literally what I was just thinking.
I mean, that's based off of John Smith's erotic friend fiction.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to go to Black Cauldron.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's got a cult following
I recently saw that in a theater, actually.
That's
not the first time, but like the second time, because I saw it when it came out in the 90s on home video for the first time ever. Like in 97, like over a decade after it was in theaters.
I took when it opened, I took my little brothers to go see it. I was 16 years old, and I took my brothers. They were, let's see, if I was 16, hang on, I gotta do math. Jeff would have been 11, and Jeremy would have been 9. So
I would have
9
had
and 11.
nightmares for months.
Yeah,
those kids used to watch. Well, these two guys, because my brother and I are a lot older than they are, had seen Halloween, Exorcist.
Okay.
My brother used to go to the video store, the mom and pop video store, and rent horror movies based on purely on the cover, purely on whether or not the cover looked cool. And so he'd bring home a stack, and then we would get, because we were wholesome Colorado boys, we'd get like all these sugary caffeinated drinks, and we'd drink soda and watch movies all night while my parents showed dogs, so they'd be out.
Not matured.
They'd be on the road, and so we would just watch horror movies all night. And so those two, by that time, had seen so much actual, like, just blood. Ghosts and Satan and all this stuff. So they didn't care.
Confession. I think the Black Cauldron is exactly the kind of movie Kingdom of the Sun would have turned out as if it had been made as Kingdom of the Sun.
You're not
too much going on.
So
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, just wanted to just say that the yodeling villain song is absolutely my favorite sequence, with the crazy visuals happening there, the overhead chorus lines of cows, and the pink elephants, heffalumps, and woozles style color changing. And
So
I laughed
funny.
so hard
Actors.
when the hair is pulled from the cows and it is still the bright,
Still-
colorful, stylized color from the.
Yeah.
That was a interesting sequence because the color change thing was a thing that Will Finn had seen recently watched Aristocats, and there's a crazy musical sequence where they just start flipping colors, just
Yeah.
and it's like a 60s psychedelic thing. And Will said, I think this would be fun. And I said, yeah. I said, if we do it on this beat, if we do it on the 2 and the 4, or whatever that I can't remember the count but that's how if you watch it, you can see it that the color changes happen on the count.
Yes.
It works really well with the music. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And then poor Kevin Harkey had to storyboard that stuff. Kevin Harkey.
Oh, no.
Kevin Harkey, why that is so funny is Kevin Harkey was the guy who trained me at Disney, but Kevin was famous for boarding the Stampede in Lion King, the baboon attack in Tarzan.
Okay.
If you're and now this
So
is
he's
thing.
good at drawing a lot of things.
A lot of things, yeah. So he was always given like sequences where like also 8 million characters all do things at once. So poor Kevin had to and he boarded it brilliantly.
And he wished he had not let them know that he was good at that.
And I just went in because I knew I worked so closely with him, and then I was directing him, and I just went in. Kevin, we're going to give you this sequence, and he went, okay. I went, I'm sorry.
I know that the listeners won't be able to see the face you made, but like the just defeated look in your eyes when you said that was like perfect. So good.
And also, sorry, what was I gonna? Oh, I know there were years in between, but just in my mind, my brain is switching back and forth between the Stampede and the Lion King to silly cows dancing, yodeling, and it's just hilarious to me.
Yeah, they're all. It's funny because they're all different. They're all different flavors and different tones, but it's still a million animals all doing one thing at the same, doing something at the same time.
Yeah,
and
tracking them. Alameda Slim was gonna become president or try to become president and take over the Washington.
That was an idea. Now what's interesting is that somehow I didn't get to tell how this all came out on the. I talked at length about this on the movies with cheese, the musicals with cheese, because we don't that believe it or not, that rarely came up until those guys asked about it. And they were like, they thought it was a joke. I'm like, no, it wasn't a joke. We tried to do that. And it's a better idea. I will. Yeah. I said it on their podcast. I'll say it here. I say it anytime anybody asks me. It's a better idea. It's a stronger idea. It's a funnier idea.
It's more compelling.
Yeah, it's much more compelling. And it turns him. It takes a weird villain and ratchets him up to supervillain status. Yeah. He's like a Batman villain at that point. That came up once.
A lot of Batman.
Yeah, Batman's a great it all goes back to Batman in the way that, I mean, because it's primal. It's primal. He has the best villains, and he's arguably the best character. Yes, it's just Zorro in a bat costume, but it's much more than that. But
Zorro is sort of a Western, so there you go.
It's true. And it is Batman's kind of a Western idea, because he's, up until they started giving him sidekicks, he was a loner, this lone guy. Oh. But so the way that happened is we were trying to come up with we were trying to figure out, we were just pushing on everything and trying to come up with a more, like, what is Slim after? What, he's gathering all the cows. We know we can't turn them into hamburger. We know we can't, because that'll make these people mad. We know we can't.
I read in the trivia that it was like,
deal would be bad.
The McDonald's, they didn't want kids to think too hard about that.
Exactly. And at the time, by the way, Oprah had just been sued successfully by some guy for vilifying the beef industry. So they're like, we don't want any of that kind of heat. So
he's just gonna. The cows had to not be a part of the cow stealing process because it's all about the land.
They're stealing the cows. They're stealing the cows and selling them for what? We don't know. We never say.
That's off screen. We never
say. Yeah, we just never say.
They're going to a farm upstate.
But we were trying to figure that out, and at the time there was a story artist named I think it was Ralph Sondag. He was in the room, and he wasn't with us very long. He was on Pocahontas, and he was on a couple other things, and he would occasionally just Ralph always had very weird ideas. He would just suddenly go, I was thinking about this, and then we were like so we were like just talking about what does Slim want, and Ralph just out of the blue went, well, Custer wanted to be president. And we're like, and Will went, that's great, that's amazing. And I went, I think that could work. And we're like, so Slim wants to be president. And they were like, well, how's he going to be president? And I can't remember who said it first, but we were like, he's going to use the cows as a zombie army to stampede Washington and take over.
I thought you were going to say, I think cows should vote.
I'm sure that like he could have. I'm certain somebody may have said that, but
and then really, if that version of the movie did wind up getting made, then during the insurrection, people would be gifting it on Twitter and being like, "Hey, yeah, life imitating art.
This is happening again." Yeah, exactly. But there were so many people who were like, I remember the crew was like. So many people on the crew were like, it's so political. I don't want to know about that. They were like, they just had such a distaste for the idea. And I'm like, it's funny.
Is it political?
No, it's not at all political.
The White House is there.
It's no more political than the 1980 Lone Ranger movie where Butch Cavendish kidnaps Ulysses S. Grant and holds him hostage. It's no more political than that. And I tried to make that point several times. And I'm like, and everybody's like, what? Who? What? I said, the Lone Ranger movie. I haven't seen that. Of course. And I'm like, they're like, you watch too many movies. I'm like, okay, whatever.
I feel like this one's relevant to what we're making. Maybe you should go home and watch it. It's like an hour and a half.
It works. It works. The other thing is there was the problem is that every time I pulled up an example, and there are a lot of them, they're always in a movie that doesn't quite work. Like the Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu. By the way, I'm an encyclopedia of movies that are terrible that I love.
Oh yeah, I can tell already.
The Fiendish Plot,
all of this.
The Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu with Peter Sellers, which is really racist, but he's trying to kidnap the Queen so that he can hold her hot. So there's this whole thing, and I'm like, well, in the Fiendish Plot of I use that as an example too, and they're like, what? Who? I never seen that.
You're like, Peter Sellers, come on, that's not as obscure.
And I just learned that I watched way more movies than most of the people I was.
Than people who are trying to make movies with you. You're like, why do you guys want to make movies if you've never seen them?
We've got to have money.
I'm curious because the Lone Ranger in my book is pretty Western, and these people hadn't seen it. How much experience with Western media did your crew have?
Some of them had. A lot of the problem I had when I first got onto the movie, when I first joined up with the movie, was that a lot of the references being made were really old.
Yeah.
It was all Roy Rogers. It was all Randolph Scott. It was all singing, dancing cowboys. And so many of the guys were like, oh yeah, I grew up with my, and I'm like, how old are you that you grew up on Randolph Scott and Roy Rogers? Because I remember my dad used to try and force me to watch that stuff, and I hated it because I didn't that, anytime I hear that dunga 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 dunga, I check out. But I really was inspired by like High Plains Drifter and the Sergio Leone stuff. That type of stuff I thought was really cool and really stylish and really fun, and still holds up today. It's still really modern. And so that's the stuff we tried to like, we just tried to take the take it away from that and put it on something else, and put it on, we tried to put it on the something a little more modern. We were just trying to, but that's where we were going with that.
Like,
And
you would think that the people working with you would take a little more time to, because I know for me, when I'm working on a project, I try to do research into and embrace the world of things that I'm trying to make. So it's like, the more you consume of that from different eras, like even if you're watching like the Three Amigos, like
which
it's
we
still
love.
yeah. It still is like bringing in different aspects that you can come in and play with everyone. So it's like, I guess they just didn't want to think about work when they got home, which valid.
Well, there was a lot of research. I just think that something as odd as that, as a goal for the protagonist, was just too far out. And we actually were told, who was it? How many people? It wasn't just the crew. I think it was also like, it was like the higher ups were putting a lot of pressure on us to find something else. And part of it was that it was 2000. It was just after the 2000 election, and arguably a Texan had stolen the White House.
Oh yeah, okay.
So
I was about to say, how is that
would do it.
political? And then I'm like, right, hanging Chad,
Yeah.
right, early 2000s.
Yeah. So yeah, we just kind of acquiesced and said, okay, well, what if it's the other thing that was happening at the time? We went to history. We went back to history. Like, what was happening at the time? Land grabs. So what if he's trying to get all the land, and he's using the cattle he's stealing the cattle so he can buy the land? And we're like,
build Almeida-topia.
Yeah. And what was good about that idea was it was directly related to Patch of Heaven and their dilemma, because that was why he was stealing the cattle, which is why, in order to buy the land, now she wasn't a cattle rancher, but her farm was threatened by this land grab, and he was going to buy that very farm. So if they catch the bad guy, they save their farm.
I love the visual gag of Slim had never noticed Little Patch of Heaven because it is the exact shape of his nephew's head, and he always stands in front of it.
I can't remember whose idea that was, but it always got a laugh. And
it's a good joke.
It always got a laugh. And what was sad was
that's my comfy spot.
What was sad was how many times we had to send, because we got the shot back from animation and compositing, and you would not believe how many times, I'll draw it real quick.
Ooh.
I don't know I can't remember what these guys look like. So. You can't, how many times this was not composited correctly to a ridiculous extent. And it's like, oh wait, it was supposed to be, let me do this.
This is an audio-based medium.
Sorry about that. But we kept getting this back from compositing.
What?
Yeah. So
and I'm like, no, he's supposed to be in front of this.
So what he's showing us is it's like a head behind him, like a shadow in the distance.
Yeah, we're like, no, he's supposed to cover that perfectly. Okay, we'll do it again. And it just kept coming back wrong.
I think my favorite thing about it is it's like the coloring is slightly different from everything else. Like if you're living in a house where someone has smoked for 20 years and you take the picture off the wall and you see the wallpaper as it was 20 years ago versus the rest of it. Like it's like he was almost like leaning his head against it. Like it didn't get aged like everything else.
Yeah, there was so when they did nail it, it was just, I think there was just a miscommunication. When they did nail it, it was so well done, and every department took that storyboard and just ratcheted it up and just made it that much funnier. And
so funny,
because it was funny in boards, but when we saw it in rough animation in a screening, people literally were laughing so hard that they missed the next 3 jokes.
Yeah.
We actually had to space the timing out, and we were like, is the laugh going to be that big every time? And every time we showed it, the laugh was that big. So we had to do the Marx Brothers thing of just opening up the time just a little bit so that you could hear the. And we did that. A lot of that we did with just reactions. So we just we cut to Slim, and he's like, he does that eye twitch thing.
At what point did Slim's sidekick being 3 Gomer Piles come into the concept?
They are actually inspired by I can't remember who. I remember when we always wanted there to be more than one, so we were like, well, there'll be 3, and we can save because our budget was constricted. Let's just make them all the same guy. Let's make them all the same design, like Huey, Dewey, and Louie. We'll just make them the same person. So it's one model, and it'll be that much easier to clean up. And if they're all standing in a scene, we can just use one character, just pose it, just and then just color the bandanas differently. That was my idea, because I'm like, that's what we did on Mulan. We just colored those guys. You can identify them by their bandana color. The story artist who was doing most of those sequences was a guy named Sam Levine, who started just doing that voice. That's Micah. That voice. He just did it naturally. So we wanted to cast him immediately. We're like, we had him do the scratch, and we cast him as the voice ultimately, and we just pitched it. We just pitched his voice up and down so that they sound like 3 different guys. But that voice is actually based on a character from the Newhart show. There used to be there, if you remember, there were these 3 guys that would come in. 2 of them didn't talk, but the main one would come in. Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. This is my other brother Daryl. That was their shtick. And every time they'd come in, they'd introduce themselves. And that actor had this kind of funny voice. He had this, and he's been in all sorts of stuff, but it's just stuck in our head. And Sam took this and made it much more arch. And he just kind of tweaked it. And we actually, in order to do due diligence, we're like, well, why don't we see if that guy can do the voice? So we brought him in and to do readings, and he just wasn't as funny as Sam. So we said, thank you very much. And we just used Sam.
I like the gag, and this doesn't remind me of something, because the thing I'm reminded of came afterwards, so I'm not sure what the word for that is. I like the gag of they don't recognize him when he puts on his disguise.
The Perry the Platypus syndrome.
Yeah, and also they also do that in Emperor's New School. Yzma disguises as the principal, and every episode, Kronk doesn't recognize it. I mean, Kronk knows who the principal is, but he doesn't realize that it's also that they're the same person.
I think that I might be remembering this wrong, but if I'm being completely honest, I think we cribbed it from the Tick.
Yeah, probably.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
The Patrick Warburton show, where they were bringing them into that.
It was also in this movie.
Oh, it's the champion, and it's like, well, where'd he go? And the guy, whenever the champion took his glasses off, Tick couldn't tell him.
Yes, I remember that guy.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were like, wouldn't it be funny if the Willies couldn't recognize him in his in his garb? Hey, who are you? So we just did it.
It's also a joke people have made about Batman.
Yeah.
And Superman.
Well, it's a Superman thing. It is a Superman thing where Clark Kent in the Tick, they just took the Superman thing and made a joke about it. And the only one who's fooled is the Tick. He's the only one who's.
And so it goes back to so again, a Patrick Warburton character is fooled, just like in the TV show I was talking about, by someone. So maybe the Emperor's New School stole it from the Tick as well.
They might have, or they may have stolen it from us. I don't know.
I love that Patrick Warburton's character, the horse, is just named Patrick.
Yeah. Because we wanted to make that.
He's also the horse that, when you go on the ride, you go on Soarin', and there's a horse there, and he says, "Hello, my name is Patrick. I'll be your chief flight attendant." So that's his name in Soarin' also.
That's funny. Yeah, we just had that idea that when Buck talks the other horse out into leaving, somebody boarded that sequence, and it was hilarious. And we were like, what if that horse was Patrick Warburton? Because we were imitating Kronk to each other, because the screenings were happening, and we were just always and we were also doing Putty from Seinfeld,
Yeah.
just good. That type of just when we had him come in and do Patrick the horse, he just does that. He does that.
He's so good.
So good. Coming back to the triplets for a second, there was an alternate ending pitch, like at the last minute, wasn't it? Or like an alternate version of the movie that Michael Eisner pitched with the triplets, right?
Yeah, he thought the entire movie should be told from their point of view, which is a avant genius idea, and we would have done it if the movie wasn't 6 months away from release. But yeah, that's the thing. He was like, they're the funniest characters in the movie. Why can't we have more of them? Which, by the way, is a thing that Michael Eisner does a lot. He was famous for in a Lion King story after a Lion King screening. His note was he wanted more of the funny monkey. He wanted more Rafiki.
Monkey.
So it sounds to me like he consumes media like a young child, and that's who he's actually marketing towards.
Yeah, he just likes that stuff. And he understands animation purely as just a comedic thing. He doesn't really understand it as anything other than comedy.
I mean, it's such an intellectual medium that can be used in such an amazing way. So it just is handicapping the artists, the writers, to not treat it that way.
Wild that under the supervision of someone who only sees animation as a comedic thing, things like Mulan and Lion King were allowed to happen.
Well, but that's why those things have comedic elements to them. Whereas, like, I think if you had left, like, if you let, say, Dean Dubois make Mulan, it would have had far fewer jokes because Dean would have seen the more dramatic aspects of it. I think that Mulan, I think the movie as it is fine. I think the humor works. I've never been a big fan of those songs. I just don't think they're nothing against Matthew and David, but I just was like, okay.
But the songs were done by Alan Menken.
Oh, and Home in the Range. Yeah.
Oh, those songs were like excellent. Like I think the first time I ever saw footage of this movie was someone just posting one of the songs to TikTok and being like, this is one of Alan Menken's most underrated songs. I don't remember which one it was, but the magnificent soundtrack, honestly.
Yeah.
Alan did a good job. Alan's interesting in that when you're in the room with Alan, you're also in the room with his 9 Oscars.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So when he tells you something, when he has an opinion, it's going to carry a lot of weight. He desperately wanted the movie to be more musical, and I don't think what's interesting is that sitting here 19 years later, I don't think he was necessarily wrong. Maybe it should have been. Maybe it would have been more popular. I don't know. But at the time, that was not. Musicals were not popular at the time. I don't know if.
And that's why almost none of the Disney movies at the time were musicals.
I'm trying to think of like what was going on in 2004 on Broadway. Because there was like a dip in the popularity of musicals for a minute.
There was people just didn't like them, and what was interesting was that, and I used to say it was this insidious plot. They somehow taught kids to like musicals again, and they did it through things like High School Musical, through all those musical shows on Disney Channel. Then Glee came along, and then suddenly we've got singing in Disney movies again, and people are like, we love it. But back at the time, people were like, why are people singing? That's dumb. They were just.
Sorry, go on.
It was just a weird thing happening culturally where like people just checked out. They thought it was for kids if the character started singing or something.
I'll say from a musical theater standpoint, because my degree is in music, there was like a short time where it was kind of like that jukebox musical idea where it's like they start singing it doesn't really progress the plot. And what I love about, like specifically Alan Menken's work is that he keeps it plot driven. It's not necessarily something that's just plopped into the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
That was the thing for a minute was let's just drop a song in here because it's going to do things like it doesn't actually progress the plot.
Yeah, the Howard, when he was working with Howard, Howard in particular would place the songs. Howard, that was what Howard did. It was his genius. And Chris Sanders once asked Howard, because Chris is great because he'll get with people and immediately ask them the right question. I don't know how he's got that gift. And he just said, I have a question. How do you know where to put the songs? And Howard said, well, I put them where the story turns are, Chris. And Chris went, oh, that makes total sense. And he said it like that, very matter of fact, why I put them where the story turns are. So anytime there's a story turn in a Howard and Allen movie, it's right where the story is, and a lot of times it's used to convey difficult information. The song I always bring up is an example of good storytelling that seems redundant but isn't. Is Poor Unfortunate Souls, where she sells it to Ariel, but at the same time she's explaining to the audience the stakes.
Yeah.
So
there is so much story happening in that song. If you actually track about how much you know about that movie comes during that sequence.
Exactly.
How much you know about that character at all is zero, and she introduces so much in that song.
Yep. And the example, like what we discovered at Disney is that many times you have to tell, for an audience to get something, you have to say it to them 3 times. And the way Kirk Wise used to explain it is you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you just told them. And so in Poor Unfortunate Souls, there are some interesting tricks. First of all, he'll put in stuff like, now listen real close, this is the tricky part. If at the end of the 3rd day, and at that time she's already said it 3 times, like 3 days, you have 3 days, 3 days, 3 days. They say it 3 times in that song, and demonstrate what's going to happen. And she demonstrates what's going to happen if she doesn't get her voice. She's going to turn into one of those little weeds with the eyeballs. And so it's genius storytelling.
No one knows what to call those things, but
Poor Unfortunate Souls.
Yeah, that's what they are.
I thought they were polyps or something, but I don't
know. They're
little
weeds with eyeballs
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just but it's good. It's just good story. And with Home on the Range, it was tough because we weren't doing sung stuff, sung on songs. We were doing the Toy Story thing where it was just like they were like needle drops.
Yeah,
it was a little more difficult to integrate them into the movie.
It sounds like the idea they were wanting to go with the Greek chorus was what they did with Hercules, and that movie did not do well box office wise compared to other movies.
Yeah, and that's a thing they did in Little Shop too. They've got the Greek
Woo!
chorus that carries you through.
That's my favorite musical.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
How, as demonstrated, Howard knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
There's a line in this, and the line by itself isn't a joke. It just made me laugh because of who was saying it and how they're most prominently known. Where Grace says violence won't solve anything, but when I hear it, I'm thinking of Tiffany of The Bride of Chucky saying it.
Yeah, she was funny. One of the reasons why, her delivery was we always knew how to write for her.
Yeah.
You could just hear the lines. You could just say them in her voice and just.
Oh yeah, the whole time me and my wife were just repeating her in our best Jennifer Tilly impressions.
Well, I know that she wasn't the first one cast in that role. There was it was Sarah Jessica Parker in that role, correct?
It was Sarah Jessica Parker.
How much of, I know that Roseanne, that was your idea, right?
Yes.
How much of the cast was set in stone before you got there, and how much of it was like part of your creative process putting them in?
Roseanne was our idea. Jennifer Tilly was a recast, and that was suggested by Tom Schumacher. Cuba Gooding Jr. was already in place to play Buck. We had the idea to cast Randy Quaid as Alameda Slim because of Will had seen Freaks, that Alex Winter movie, and the manner in which that he read his lines, and the way his theatricality in that movie
Also
was
owned by
perfect.
Disney now.
Yeah, it was perfect. So we animated a couple scenes. We had Chris Buck animate a couple scenes to some dialogue from Freaked, and it was
Disney
perfect.
now owns a movie where a character says, "We'll have Disney's dead ass."
And he was perfect. He came in, he was really nice. I know he's having troubles as late, but when we worked with him, he was really nice.
That seems to be.
It was great. He was
seems
perfect.
to be what has happened with, like, they're really nice and great to work with, and then
Yeah, because you also have Roseanne Barr in this movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
and also
she was really sweet. She was really nice to us.
James Woods as Hades and Hercules. The stories from behind the scenes I've heard are very similar, whereas now he's very much not a great person from what I've seen
Right.
on social media and heard from stories.
Right.
But when they were making that movie, apparently he was much more personable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of my favorite casting were some of the side characters, like the chicken.
Oh yeah,
Estelle Harris is the chicken.
she was already in place. We loved her because they already had a relationship with her thanks to the Toy Story movies. So she was the easy one. The one that the ones we were involved with was we cast Marshall Efron as the duck, who we loved. Let's see. I can't.
I was surprised to see Joe Flaherty.
Yeah.
Oh, we love Joe. We were big fans of Joe.
He was perfect.
He's so good. I love Freaks and Geeks, and
he had just finished Freaks and Geeks when we brought him in to read. So yeah, Joe was, I think, our choice. We love Joe.
Count Floyd.
And then we had who was the one? Let's see.
When did How Do You Do, Fellow Kids, Steve Buscemi
Steve Buscemi. When we discovered that we needed somebody to be the go-between with Slim, we decided we needed somebody. We kept saying a Steve Buscemi type. So we
drew Steve Buscemi.
We basically drew. We had Joe Mosier design the character, and we sent that to him with his offer, and he showed it to his son, and his son said, "Dad, you have to do this," and that was it. He said yes, and then he was part of the movie. Where I got to direct Steve Buscemi.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which was awesome.
Good.
What was that experience like?
It was cool. He's really hardworking. He's one of these guys, and it's more rare than you would think, unfortunately. He's one of these guys that actually reads the script ahead of time and has ideas.
That's awesome.
That feels very in character for him, just as a person. Like that feels right.
Yeah. So he comes in. He reads. His reads are always like, I remember. He would do his thing, and I would like pick either one or three. It's like he was so easy to record and so easy to work with. He was really nice, really cool. The other one was, let's see, who am I thinking of? Charles Hayde as Lucky Jack was fun. He was I knew him from Hill Street Blues. He was Renko the cop on Hill Street Blues, and so he was funny. Did that, like, loved doing that voice, loved doing the part, wanted a song, kept pushing for a song. Can my character have a song?
Was there ever at the time any pressure from higher ups to put in something we could turn into a ride if it does well? I'm wondering. No,
we at the time, I don't know if this is still true. At the time, what we were doing was so separate from what everybody else was doing. We were the head of the snake. Whatever we did, they would come in and try and figure out how to make stuff out of what we were doing. Nobody ever came in and told us, put a princess in this, put this in this. It was always we did what our movie needed, drove everything else. Now, what was interesting is we did have something that would make a good ride in the movie at one point that we cut out. It was we had this idea that there was a train chase.
There
we go. There's also the mine cart. as well.
Well, we had that too. That came later, and we did that because we wanted we thought we were missing some thrill ride stuff. We just
That
thought we were
sequence
missing
is
something.
beautiful.
We wanted something like that where we just wanted a pure action sequence, and so we were like, well, what can we do? And it's like, well, there's this mine. Oh, cool. Let's do that. Let's have a chase through the mine. It'll be fun. It'll be like we were like, let's start with the Indiana Jones thing and see how far we
Yeah,
can push
Temple of
it.
Doom, I was about
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah, we just that was our starting point. We tried to push it as far as we could. And so that was, and it works because they take him and then they run through the mine with him in that cart.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous and silly.
I really, sorry.
Yeah, we like that. There used to be a thing where the train got away and the cows had to catch a train, and so the cows have to try and get on a moving train, and it was just too complicated. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like it would be difficult to animate.
Really, what's going to stick with me most about this movie is the way a Western can work in animation, because there are things that I've certainly seen in Westerns, but they're so much bigger here. There are just way more cows on screen. The train chases, minecart chase is way crazier, and I love that this film exists for that, and it kind of is like I'm wanting to see more of that, and it's
same. We wanted to do more too, but yeah, we're always locked into those. It's interesting because the movie will tell you what it needs. There were screenings where we're like, oh, we don't need this and we don't need that, and the movie's too long. And so you always want to cut to the movie to the point where the audience goes, I love that, I want to see more of it. You don't want to have a movie where, like some of them, I'm done with this. I've watched 15 minutes of it. I can turn it off now.
You never want the audience wanting less.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what I did with both Lightyear and Strange World. I turned them off after I turned Strange World after 15 minutes, and Lightyear I tried to watch in chunks, and it eventually.
Endurance.
We weren't feeling well when we tried to watch Lightyear, so we stopped, and we have yet to return to it.
You don't need to. I think you kind of know how that goes.
I still think
watch something better.
I still think that
I'm guessing at the end he gets turned into an action figure.
If
What a twist!
It would be nice if there were a really better TV show that they could actually put on Disney Plus about Buzz Lightyear.
Oh, those guys up there hate that show.
Why? It's so good.
Because it was made without their involvement.
Yep.
So there's a lot that was made without their involvement.
Yes, I know. But they think that they're geniuses. I've never seen a group of people more sure of their own infallibility.
They're making some real questionable decisions right now. Like
I noticed that as of relatively recently, you have broken into the television animation or Netflix animation system. After not having any credits for a while, how did that come about?
Are you talking about on Peabody, or are you talking about the Wing Feather side?
Well, Peabody, I a lot of your recent credits are stuff like Peabody, Wing Feather, the Dragons TV shows.
I discovered and I cast shade on feature stuff because it's fun and it's easy to get a laugh. So I'm not. I hate insulting the work of my friends. That stuff's hard to do. And we're making features is really hard to do. It's an endurance race. The thing I discovered when I was asked to go and work on the Dragons TV show, they're like, would you like to try directing this stuff? And I said, ooh, and I've got to answer this question and go have dinner. I've been told dinner is ready by my wife. Okay. It is much easier. I like being able to problem solve on the fly and just make something. And then if there's a problem, you say, oh, it's this. Yeah, that's that. And then you make it and it's done. You just problem solve you just think on your feet much faster. And with features, it starts to feel like you're watching mistakes happen in slow motion.
Yeah.
And you just can't, it's hard to turn the ship around. So that's why I enjoy TV. It's the immediacy, the fun, and just there's actually less. I've actually felt more creative on some of these projects than I did working in features on Home on the Range even. So let me just text my wife. There we go. Okay.
I think that that goes to show that like the way that your brain works, looking at the full story, knowing what the full arc is and being able to focus in on a moment probably is like very conducive to the way that you work.
I think so. I think so. And I think I do better when I'm given less time. And
that is an
That's the
ADHD
ADHD
classic.
thing.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I saw a TikTok recently that was like what it's like to have ADHD. Your deadline's in a month. No, can't do that. Needs to be quicker. What?
Yeah. Yeah, or if you have a month, you'll figure out how to waste time until like 3 days before and then get it all done in 3 days.
Oh yeah, and then you'll still do it as if it were due in 3 days.
Yeah. It's just the way it is.
Yep. I love the aesthetic of the movie, the character designs, and the backgrounds. Which I know are done by different people, but they both work together really well.
Yeah, that was Dave Cutler was the art director. Carol Police was a production designer, I believe, and she had a big influence on especially the expansive, like that piece behind you. Carol was really always pushed for these big expansive.
And the colors are gorgeous. There's you're in the desert, everything's sort of one color, and she finds so many ways to get so much variety out of that location.
There was that was, let's see if I'll name them all, and I might forget a few. Carol Police, Dave Cutler, the art director, Christy Maltese, the head of backgrounds, who was very important in getting the style down, that kind of handmade style.
Kind of looks like a children's book in a way.
Yeah, she nailed it and got all her painters to like nail it as well. Very talented and very, very important to that movie. And then Joe Mosier was the head of character design, and so Joe, like, really his hand is seen throughout all those characters, but also with a big assist from Sandro Cluzo, who was one of our principal animators, and was one of you probably know the name because they both worked on Groove, and were instrumental in getting that look. And we really loved that look on Groove, and so we encouraged it. I think it was already kind of being done on our movie, but we kind of pushed. I was a big fan of Joe. I went to school with Joe, and was just like, man, just do your thing. I just wanted him to like have his hand and make the show look cool. So he brought those characters. He would do drawovers and just bring everything in. Just kind of bring it in. All the animators did kind of slight redesigns of their characters, but Joe was always kind of having a hand in making sure everything stayed in style.
Yeah.
So it's those guys that you have to thank for how wonderfully this thing looks. Plus, people in development like Mike Gabriel, Mike Giamo, and Mike Humphreys.
When I'm recording this, I can just go on Facebook and thank Sanford.
Yeah, you should start rapping, Micah, and let John have dinner.
Oh, all right.
Oh yeah, I gotta go. Sorry, we can do this again though if you want.
Oh yeah, do you have anything to plug?
Wing Feather Saga, which is on the Angel Studios app and on YouTube. It is a wonderful, fun, family safe and friendly fantasy series, but it's cool and it goes to places that you don't normally predict. It's nice fantasy, action adventure fantasy thing you can watch with your kids.
I recommend it.
And I'm so glad to hear you're having so much fun working on it.
Yeah, having a great time. It's wonderful.
All right. Well, if you want, I'm going to let you go, and then you all can plug it afterwards if you want.
Sure.
Charley and
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This was delightful.
This was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and I'll definitely come back again. Just hit me up anytime on Twitter.
All right. Well, I'm probably going to want to have you in the sequel to my documentary.
Very cool. All right. I'll see you guys.
Good
Bye.
night. Have a great evening.
Good night.
All right. Pluggy time.
Charlie, you want to go?
Sure. I am working on an abridged series of the Zelda cartoon, and rather than making fun of the plot beats like a lot of abridged series do, I am just kind of trying to say, what would I want in a TV show, and how can I make that out of footage that I have access to here in this cartoon? It's called Well Abridge Me Princess. Currently, April 1st, it can be found wellabridgemeprincess.tumblr.com. If you're listening to this after May 10th, it will be on my YouTube, which is Charley the Pirate Thady. That's Charlie with an EY and Thady with a they.
With
And
an
Shelby's
EY.
in it. And Shelby's in it.
I am. I also want to plug WAMP for this because yeah, what Charlie's doing with it is absolutely incredible. Like bringing some new technology into an old TV show, which is amazing.
There's a certain point where I'm like, am I looking at these frames and putting more work into this than anyone who actually animated it did?
I would argue you are, honestly. Like, it's fantastic, the work you're doing. I bragged about you all weekend, I told you. You know I love you. My plugs are I am Shelby Sessler on everything, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. My YouTube is Shelbini VO. Right now it's mostly like cosplay and voiceover, just fun, silly things. I'm hoping to start a podcast soon, so like keep your ear out on that.
And we had a podcast together before.
Yes, Mystery Shack Look Back,
which is completed. It is a look through Gravity Falls, the production and the culture surrounding it. No spoiler, so it can be used as a book club for those just getting into the show, or as a time capsule for those who were there as it was airing. We look through fan theories that were posted when the episodes were out, and we try to give them each equal weight, so someone who doesn't know what's going to happen will find the disproven fan theories as viable as the proven ones. Shelby was a guest numerous times throughout our run of the 2 seasons, and then once we got into as we got into more complicated territory of things that were longer than 22 minutes, we spaced out our release schedule, and that allowed for us to make time for Shelby to come in and interview Alex Hirsch with us.
Heck yeah.
We have amazing guests. If you enjoyed our questions for John today, we have talked to Rob Renzetti, who was the supervising producer of Gravity Falls and creator of My Life as a Teenage Robot. We talked to Michael Rianda, who was the creative director of Gravity Falls Season 1 and the director of Mitchell's versus the Machines. We talked to Jason Ritter, the voice of Dipper Pines, Alex Hirsch, as I mentioned, and sort of talked to Matt Chapman, who was a writer voice actor on the show, but really talked to Strong Bad.
All right. I have made a documentary called Beware the Groove, the Making of a Cult Classic, all about the history of the Emperor's New Groove from its inception as Kingdom of the Sun to basically its reputation today as a cult classic. And Charlie is the narrator in that documentary.
That's true. That was a lot of fun. As you could hear, I related with John about his ADHD. I just tried to put full energy into it, like I was talking to a friend about a movie I liked, and not like I was narrating a piece of nonfiction.
Yeah.
Authenticity.
I also, what did you say?
I said authenticity and delivery.
Yeah. I also am working on a couple animated features right now. One is called Sharks, and it's basically a throwback to like the 70s, 80s type parody films using reverse Jaws as the premise. Hopefully that will be out by 2025, but that might change. And to be released, I don't know when, sometime after that, I am making an animated slasher movie. So that'll be a lot of fun. And you can find me at podcast TENP on Twitter and at Micah Hirsch on Twitter. All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
It was a lot of
you
fun.
for being had. Ha! You've been had.